In the tumultuous realm of modern music, Stephen Page emerges as a luminary, a bard with an uncanny ability to plumb the depths of the human psyche. With a voice that carries the weight of 1,000 stories and a pen that weaves intricate narratives, Page's sonic odyssey transcends mere notes and lyrics, a soul-bearing journey that resonates through the heartlands of contemporary melody. As a troubadour of introspection, Page crafts anthems for the disquieted souls of our era. He lays bare the raw nerves of existence, delivering verses that slice through the haze of everyday life. In the finely tuned cadence of his ballads, you'll find echoes of joy, sorrow, and the unending quest for meaning. A tapestry of emotions, Page's songs etch themselves into the collective consciousness, leaving an indelible mark on the musical landscape. This is a symphony of the human condition. Co-founder and former lead singer of the Barenaked Ladies is thrilled to be returning to Koerner Hall with his trio on September 30th, 2023. This is where our conversation begins. Big day, Koerner Hall coming up, and it's on your terms.
Indeed. This is I played Koerner Hall so many times, but as somebody else's guest, so to finally be able to kind of do it my own show there is pretty exciting.
Now, in planning a situation as such, do you lose your mind over this? Do you just lay out the tunes and go, okay, I think I'm going to change this right now?
Yes, I kind of do, but only when it comes to Toronto shows. I wish Toronto shows could just be normal.
Yeah,
but there, because it's a hometown show, and because Toronto gets every show that comes through, travels anywhere. I think there's at least on my part a desire to make every Toronto show special. So, I've been touring for years now with the Stephen Page Trio, and I feel like we've put together a really great show. We can kind of play a huge range of material, but then it comes to doing a Toronto show, and it's like, well, I'd like to bring some special guests if I can. So, Andrew Burashko from The Art of Time is going to come out and play a few songs with us, and that's important to me. This is their final season, and Andrew and Art of Time have been so, pardon the pun, instrumental in kind of my rebirth as an artist in a way, and I want to kind of pay that back and pay some tribute to that. And then our great friend Tom Wilson's going to come out and sing a few songs with us as well as open the show.
Andrew Burashko has done an amazing job with this. I mean, doing the Joni Mitchell and the different themes that he picked over time, and the creative writing and aspect of how he presents. So this is his last season, huh?
Yeah, it's just that's the nature of the changing music scene in Southern Ontario right now. Is I think they just couldn't make it sustainable anymore.
You had spoken in the past. You could only play here occasionally, and
right.
Even in Canada, but. Through the years, in every city, it seems, or smaller town, there is a venue and an arts community. And it's made it possible to tour a little more in Canada and become part of these communities.
That's right. It used to be, in the old days, we did when Barenaked Ladies did our first really big headline tour across Canada. We did 72 dates across the country, and it was amazing. It was really exciting. But what we realized was people kind of burned out on us quickly. There are only so many people who can come and see you, and you want to come back with your next record. They've already seen you 3 times on the last one. They're kind of sick of you, so they don't come. So we started playing the U.S. kind of just out of necessity, and there were so many more places to play there. But now at this stage, there really are these, performing arts centers and small performing arts societies. Like I'm going up to do a 2-week tour of Northern Ontario in November. Just because there is the opportunity to do it. I love the fact that they have access to art and culture the same way that we do in Southern Ontario now. And the fact that I have the opportunity to go and play up there for the first time in years is exciting. So there are more and more places to play, as long as people come out and see it.
Koerner Hall to you, what does that mean to you? To play Koerner Hall, I mean, we have Massey Hall and Koerner Hall. These seem to be the pinnacle of playing in Toronto. Plus, it's also, I imagine, the acoustics and the vibe of the place.
For sure. I mean, last time I played Toronto, we did Danforth Music Hall, which is a special location for me too, because I spent years living on the Danforth, and Barenaked Ladies played there in '91, and it was our first kind of real big theater show. But it's a different vibe. It's more of a rock and roll vibe at that place. And as much as I love that, Koerner Hall has that kind of special night out kind of feel. And I think it's just one of the great places to listen to music. I think the acoustics in that room, on top of the fact that it's just beautiful to look at, are really fantastic. And I think it's going to be a real treat for us to be able to play there. And
Mervyn has a way of programming that it's exactly. not, he's not putting in Beethoven's Fifth every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's creative programming, and it seems to work with the subscribers.
Well, that's great. I mean, I love Mervyn. I've known him for a long time. We've been kind of trying for years to make something work. And so this kind of mix of Stephen Page trio with Art of Time and Tom Wilson seems like the perfect blend for his style of programming. And I love what he does there.
It's pretty eclectic. I was stepping back in time, and I was thinking about, we go back to the 80s, we think about, in Toronto, what was the most effective thing? And I always thought it was Speaker's Corner.
Sure.
We never missed Speaker's Corner.
No, it's amazing. Like it was like TikTok before there was TikTok, but except everybody tuned into it on Saturday afternoon or whatever.
Yes, it was a big thing. And you guys did that too.
Yeah, I mean that was a huge turning point for us. Because we saw that we would watch the show, the compilation of clips that people would film over the course of the previous week at Speaker's Corner. Most of them were rants and stuff, and we thought this would be great. We could go in there and like put a loonie in the machine and make our music video in 60 seconds. So we cut down our song "Be My Yoko Ono" to 60 seconds exactly, and sang it in that booth. And they actually put the song in rotation on Much Music. I couldn't have asked for anything better.
It was pretty effective. I went in there at the same time wearing a toque and sunglasses and a little Casio keyboard, and I played Misty.
Nice.
Said nothing and just left.
That's great. Yeah, you can do just about anything you wanted to. Although I know there were tapes that they had back in the control room of the stuff they couldn't show on TV. I always wanted to see those.
Oh, those outtakes would have been great. Also, you guys came up at the time of SCTV. Mm-hmm. Boy, did SCTV have impactful and what a launch pad for comedy for Canadians. Because Canadians were funny. And this was like, that group was just amazing. Still are amazing when you see the reruns.
It's incredible, that group of people. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Toronto production of Godspell.
Yeah.
And you can add people like Gilda Radner and Paul Schaefer into that cast as well, and Victor Garber. But like that beginnings and into Second City and SCTV, it really is the roots of, I think, the real roots of Canadian comedy and Canadian music in a way. They really overlap. There was so much music on that show. And I think that kind of attitude that SCTV had, the commitment to the bit, the self-effacing quality, the looking for the observational humor element, and the imitative qualities are all things that happen in Canadian music as well. And so I think they were a huge influence on us specifically, but I think on a lot of people you wouldn't even expect.
And a lot of the stuff you never see today, you don't see that kind of comedy today. I don't think Saturday Night Live lived up to those standards the last 20 years. It's been hit and miss, but you could go back any one of those sketches and they will put you on the floor laughing.
Well, and I think for the most part, most Saturday Night Live stuff is more about the time that it exists in.
Yes.
Honestly, like, if I was to look at an episode from 1976, there probably wouldn't be a lot of big laughs if it was my first time watching that show. But they were relevant to the time and to the spirit of the generation. I think there are other phases of SNL where there might be more consistently funny stuff. But you could watch any episode of SCTV and get a good belly laugh at any time.
Anytime. As far as comedy today, are there any comics that stand out to you that speak to you in such a way?
Oh, I think, there are lots of great comics out there. I think that as far as like stand-up comics go, I mean, Maria Bamford is amazing. I think that I really like John Mulaney's stuff, Jim Gaffigan, like they are really great stand-up people. But as far as kind of like situational or sketch stuff, I I do love Tim Robinson. I think,
Yeah.
it's that stuff is nuts. It's absolutely insane. It's the next step past say Tim and Eric or whatever, but I love it. I love his because for him it's all about it's all about a guy who is being interrupted doing something useless that's important to him, and he doesn't understand why nobody understands him, and his feeling of being misunderstood is, I think, in our time, something that we can all relate to in some way.
As far as the writing and composing and the lyric, do you still find humor in politics? Or do you find
not, I try to, but it's terrifying.
It's distressing.
It really is, because I think, like even just every day it gets exponentially worse. When I see, like, it's hard for me to make fun of Elon Musk in a way I might have made fun of him a year and a half ago, when now, he's just outright anti-Semitic. It's like, well, we have to find a way to keep these people buffoons, but they're kind of doing that job for us, and it doesn't matter. They've developed their followings kind of because they're buffoons in a way. So I think the other, my instinct is often politically is to make fun of myself. I think that's the most effective thing. But I also think that, as a committed lefty, I feel like sometimes our desire to make fun of ourselves is what fractures the movement a lot of times too. So it is a if you think too hard about it, it can be a tough thing. But I think if you can look at it from a human perspective, there is always humor to be found.
When you were young, the sound of Canada was basically the band. Neil
Sure.
Young. It was more American derivative. I remember when I first came here in 1970, everybody was playing the band. The bands were playing the band here. It seemed like that was the sound. And it was kind of welcoming coming over on this side of the border, because this is the music we grew up with and listened to. Hear the influence of it, and having, somebody like Robbie Robertson being one of the creative forces behind it. And yet you found your own sound, which I always tried to define the Canadian sound at the time. And it was like somewhere between folk music, somewhere between Celtic, somewhere between, northern Scotland and these regions, and which is more acoustic, more folkish, more Naked Ladies sound. What was it that set that apart?
Well, it's funny, when we used to kind of bristle at the Americana stuff, and we used to think, well, we're Canadians, and here we are kind of like aping the American sound. We'd look at the band and think like, well, what is this? A bunch of Canadian guys singing with Southern accents and wearing Civil War uniforms, or, that kind of like we were dismissive of it in a way that I'm a little embarrassed about now, because I think the great thing that Canadian artists have been able to do is look at the rest of the world and kind of hold a mirror up, but also synthesize other cultures and other styles of music. But I think a truly Canadian perspective that we have on culture in general, but music in particular. And I think Barenaked Ladies did the same thing. We used to jokingly call ourselves Simon and Garfunkel meet Ernie and Bert, because it was this kind of like lighthearted comedic thing that was also and childlike, but also kind of rooted in folk. Because for me, I grew up, my parents were involved with the Mariposa Folk Festival. I grew up in that world that was like comfortable music for me. And in my late teens, it also felt oddly counter to the culture, to do things that were acoustic and things that were folky, when the rest of the world was becoming more and more synthesizer-y and Technicolor in a way, and manufactured sounding. So that was like, I think, part of the appeal of that. But the other great thing about Barenaked Ladies in those days was you had 5 guys, all with different musical tastes. So one person is into Brazilian music, and somebody else is into prog rock, and somebody else is into punk. And none of those guys listens to the other guy's music. Like, they can hear it a little bit in the van occasionally, but from general, it's not their thing. It's not their bag. But one guy brings that influence into the arrangement of a song, and it gets absorbed into that. And that, I think, it's a truly kind of Canadian approach.
Lastly, June 22nd. I was born on the same day. I was born.
Hey, all right, birthday mate.
Happy birthday from June 22nd.
It's a great day.
Something I've told people all my life, I said, if I was born on any day, I would have picked that day. and probably a lie, but it's not a bad day to be born on. Hey, thank you so
No,
much for this too.
my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What happens on June 22nd when that comes around for you? Anything? Any thoughts then?
You know what? I'm not worried about getting old. I kind of relish it
Yeah.
because I'm pleased with what I've been able to do so far, and I have great people around me. So it's a nice day to be able to celebrate. But I don't think about it too hard.